Okay, good evening, everyone. In 24 hours from now, a little bit less, I assume most people here will be in shul again. The atmosphere will be slightly different. And I want to discuss in the few moments we have now a mashal that Chazal give us to describe the opportunity and the responsibility that we have in the 48 hours ahead of us. And as we know, the time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur especially, is the time of tshuva, Seret Yemei Tshuva. We spoke at the end of Rosh Hashanah, and in the Rambam you see that if a person does not do tshuva during these days, it's not that you stay 50-50, it's not neutral. If you don't do tshuva now, when you have the opportunity, that is a very, very big negative. Because you have the opportunity and you need to take it. So Chazal give us a mashal for this. It's brought by Rabbi Yonah in his Sharei Tshuva. It appears in Kohelet Rabbah. Last year, a lot of people were talking about it. You may remember, just before Yom Kippur, there was a breakout from a prison in Israel. And it was as if this mashal had come to life. But the mashal goes as follows. The mashal starts off with the king, all good mashalim do, and a cut of listim, a group of bandits, criminals, robbers, whatever it is, who are in prison, in jail. And one day they dig a tunnel underneath the jail and they escape. If anybody's been to the prison in the Russian compound, what used to be the underground, it was the prison where all the underground prisoners were, you can still see there's a certain area where they dug a hole out and they escaped. So these prisoners escape, and there is one prisoner who's left, who for whatever reason decides, I'm not going to escape. I'm going to stay behind. Didn't get the memo, he fell asleep, whatever it was. And the guard arrives, and he walks into the cell, and he sees the cell is almost empty. All the prisoners have disappeared, except for one. So what do you think this guard does to the prisoner who's left? Goes up to him, he starts hitting him. And he says to him, Kshe Yom. He says, you fool. You absolute fool. You have a tunnel, you have an escape route. It's there, there's a possibility for you to run away. Why don't you take it? Why don't you escape? Why don't you run away? And says Rabbi Yonah, that is the mashal. The nimsha, of course, is that in these days, we have the opportunity to do tshuva in a way that is accepted, unlike the rest of the year. Gemara says in these 10 days, every yachid has got the power of the tzibur. Every individual has the opportunity to do tshuva in a way that is impossible. In just a couple of days' time, it will be impossible. But we can do it now. And if you don't take that, you're a fool. Why don't you escape? Why don't you run away for your life? And Rabbi Yonah speaks in very, very harsh terms. He says a person delays tshuva by even one day. What a terrible sin it is. How grievous it is. You shouldn't be thinking about anything else right now. Make sure you do tshuva. Now the problem is, if we think about this, it's a very nice mashal. But if you just think about it for a moment, it doesn't seem to add up. Why didn't the prisoner run away? So maybe he was lazy. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he knows that odds are, even if he runs away, he'll get caught again. And he might be in prison for longer, under harsher conditions. Maybe he's trying to he's thinking long term. Maybe he's actually done tshuva, not tshuva of the mashal, tshuva of the nimsha. Meaning he's committed a crime, he's now paying back his debt to society, he wants to keep the rules. He's been put in jail, he's going to stay. Right, the prison, the guard, the warden, whatever it is, what do you think happens to him when the mashal's finished, when his supervisor comes in and he sees what's happened? You think he's going to be pleased that he's hitting the prisoner and telling him to run away? He's going to get locked up. It doesn't make sense. Right? Here we have tshuva, we have an opportunity. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the King of Kings, has given us, has put in the rules. He's put in the system a way for us to get out of jail. We have the get out of jail free card. It's allowed. It's within that. But in the mashal, the people that are breaking the law, that are running away, the prison guard of all people is telling them, you should run. You should break the rules. You should get out. And that's the difficulty. So Rav Asher Weiss, in his Sichot on Yamim Naraim, he says, because of all these questions, he says, this mashal is so difficult. He says, I'll give you a different mashal, one which I think is more appropriate. And the mashal he gives is that there is a king who has a birthday or has the day that he ascended to the throne, whatever it is. You know, in England, you always used to have the Queen's, now it will be the king, but you have the Queen's birthday honors list, right? On the Queen's birthday, she celebrates, gives people awards. Sometimes a king on his birthday will give clemency, releases people from jail. So he says, we could give a mashal like this. The king says, in honor of my birthday, I'm giving you all clemency, but there's a condition. What do you have to do? You have to express some remorse of what you've done. There's a form. We'll send out a digital form by email. Everybody just has to click. Everybody just has to sign that you express remorse, and that's it. You'll be free. And there's one prisoner who won't sign. Now, he really is a fool. He's really losing the opportunity. That, so Rav Asher Weiss is a better mashal. Okay, very nice. But what do we do with what Chazal told us? What do we do with the mashal of Rabbeinu Yonah and of Chazal and of Kohelet Rabbah? So I think there is a key to understanding here, which can really shed new light on the entire process of tshuva, on the entirety of Yom Kippur. And perhaps we could explain as follows. We need to rethink who's who in the mashal. We need to rethink who the king is, who the prisoners are, who the listim are, etc. And if we understand that the king, you see, the reason why we have difficulty with this mashal is because we live in a world where our thinking is colored by 21st century democracy, which for all its problems, by and large, in most places in the world, there are places where this doesn't apply, but in most places in the world, somebody goes to prison, it's because they've committed a crime, because they deserve the punishment. But for much of human history, it wasn't like that. For much of human history, and it still is in certain places, that people get thrown in prison. Why? Because of the whim of a king, because of the whim of an emperor, because of the whim of a tyrant who don't like the way they've acted, or they have the wrong belief or the wrong something, and they get locked away. Not because they've actually committed a crime, not because they've actually done something wrong, not because they deserve to be there. And if we understand the mashal in this way, you understand the king in the mashal is not the real king, it's not HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The king is the Yetzer Hara. And the mashal, the nimshal is that a person, that every single one of us is imprisoned by our past deeds, by our past thoughts, by our Yetzer Hara, by that voice inside of us that says, you can't do any better than this. This is who you are. You can't change. You're going to come to Yom Kippur, you're going to stand there, you're going to say Vidui 10 times. Every year you say it 10 times. You've been doing this for how long? 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. Thousands of times in your life you've said Vidui. And nothing's ever changed. Are you kidding? That, and the result of that is that you're in the prison, that we're in the prison, and there's an opening, and there's an escape route. We don't bother taking it. We don't bother walking out. But if we understand that that's not really the king, and that's not really who I am. The warden in this mashal, he understands that people are just in prison, not because they deserve to be there, but that it's all a game. He says, it's all a game. You don't deserve to be here. You're better than this. You can do something else. Get out. Go, run for your life. You see, tshuva, there are so many stages to it and so many steps. The Rambam famously talks about 4 steps to doing tshuva. Right? Regret, vidui, kabbalah le'atid. Rabbeinu Yonah and Sharei Tshuva talks about 20 steps to doing tshuva. Okay. It's hard. There's a lot to get through. There's a lot of mechanics to work through in order to do tshuva. But there is one stage that is primary and prior to all of those, which is that a person has to believe that it works. A person has to feel that there is a possibility that I can do tshuva. There is something that I'm not the listim that the Yetzer Hara tells me I am. I'm not the person who's imprisoned by all that I've done in the past. I can be somebody else. I can start again. I really can. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us we can. Who are you to have the chutzpah but to tell him he's wrong. And that's what it's about. And that maybe is the stage where there are all the different stages and all the mechanics we have to go through in order to fulfill tshuva itself. But before tshuva comes maybe the idea of hirhur tshuva, of having just a thought. It just takes a second. And all 10 days coming up to Yom Kippur, building up to this, maybe on Yom Kippur, all we need is that moment to tell ourselves, actually, we can do it. And this will finish. The Gemara in Kiddushin, Daf Mem Tet, very famous Gemara that talks about a man comes to a woman, and he makes Kiddushin al Tanai, a conditional betrothal. We don't do this today, but the Gemara gives lots of examples of how you could do it. So he hands her the ring, and he says, Harei at Mekudeshet li al manat shani tzaddik. And says to the woman, you are betrothed to me on condition that I am a tzaddik. I mentioned this today in a group in a different shiur I was giving. And I said, how many people think that this works? And he said, it doesn't work. No ways. The Gemara says it works. Not only that it works, the Gemara says, Afilu rasha gamur. Even if this person is completely wicked. And he says, I'm giving his on condition that I'm a tzaddik, and he's completely wicked, says the Gemara, it works. Why? Shema hirher tshuva b'libo. He hasn't done a zivat achet, he hasn't done vidua, he hasn't done kabbalah latit, he hasn't done any of that. But he's had that moment, he's had that fleeting thought, maybe, that actually, I can do this. Actually, I can get out of the prison. Actually, I can be somebody else. That's what Yom Kippur is. That's what Yom Kippur gives us the responsibility. That's what it gives us the opportunity and gives us the challenge to do. Chananya ben Akasha, Omer, Tzavir Shbachim, Zakot Yisrael, V'chachu B'alem Tom Mitzvot, Shema Mar, Adonai, Chavetz, L'man Tzidko, Yagdil Torah V'yad.